Right. Hello. Good morning. Seems rather strange to be meeting you online, but I guess it's the brave new world we're in right now. So I have only been given an hour's airtime by Johnny Garside. So with that in mind, we do need to crack on a little bit to get through the stuff we need to kind of cover, make best use of the time.
That's too much.
Yeah, very funny. Hey, so this thing is entitled as an expert session, but I think we'd all say that we're kind of far from experts in this field. I suppose we're mountaineers, we're hill walkers, and therefore this expert session is an interesting thing for me. Certainly, it's been a challenging time for all of us, including myself, over the last period. Um, what I'll aim to do, though, is give you a very, very brief update of where we're at with legislation. This is stuff we've communicated for MTC and MTE quite recently. I hope to sort of think about kind of effective, targeted mitigation kind of strategies, and then hopefully get you lot to engage in a load of group discussion. I think that's most valuable in terms of how you intend to, or how you have addressed course delivery in this kind of brave new world. So that's the kind of plan. I think we'll do about 20 minutes of kind of intro stuff, and then the group work task will be for that sort of 30 minutes to 40 minutes. I think you lot will have seen this slide before already, but just for reference, in terms of the latter couple just there, it's really important you contribute as much as you can. I know it's tricky in this sort of this kind of format. And I'll try and kind of answer any questions as we go along. They might be kind of flagged, highlighted by CAF, I guess. Certainly in terms of the kind of group work stuff at the end, though, it's pretty tricky to sort of have any sort of kind of whiteboard or anything like that out there on Zoom and bring together the thoughts of 40 people in a room. So with that in mind, I'd like to contribute through the chat function. And what I'll do is I'll bring all that kind of stuff together, and I'll put out another document at a later date with my own feedback that I've collated over the last couple of months too, as a kind of shared kind of document to kind of work off, to think about. So that'll be the kind of plan. Yeah. Now, one of the things about this, I suppose, is there's a lot of talk about kind of vaccinations at the moment and where we're going to be at in kind of 6 months. But this session is still pretty valuable, I think, because we still need to deal with 6 months or so, maybe more. And also, I think, it's been a wacky time and loads of different things have kind of come to the fore, new opportunities, new ways of working. So it's probably a good idea to talk about this sort of stuff anyway, as we kind of audit what we do and think about, the best way to deliver things on mountain training courses in the future. So that's the kind of plan, I suppose. So to start with England, what's presently permissible in England? Well, new national regulations came into force on the 5th of November for 4 weeks. This kind of period will come to an end, I think, on the 2nd of December. And we've got no great insight here into what's going to happen after that any more than you lot have seen in the press. Gove's talking about stuff. Boris is planning on the back of a fag packet. It's very, very difficult to work out exactly where we might be and how that might have an impact on course delivery after that period has come to an end. But presently, for the moment, we feel it as permissible to deliver courses as for the purposes of education or indeed training. Education is our kind of principal reason we feel that course delivery is permissible. But, critically, subject to appropriate mitigation, and also absolutely critically, whilst maintaining the quality and the national consistency of the courses we deliver on behalf of Mountain Training England. So those two key things at the end are things we're going to kind of come back to, and really important to sort of, keep those two things in mind. So the weirdness in this bit of legislation has been accommodation. That's something we sort of discussed and toyed with here at Mountain Training. It's been tricky, that, in a way. But for reference, being accommodated or offering accommodation away from your primary resident is presently not allowed. There are exceptions to that, which includes children who require accommodation for the purpose of education, or indeed folk that are staying away for work purposes. We see that as kind of work-based training. So can somebody from Surrey, let's say, hop in the car and drive up and spend multiple days in the Lake District being accommodated while delivering, while attending individual days on a course? We don't see that as permissible. But could somebody, go locally to a course, attend a mountain training course? Yes, we believe that is very permissible, very possible. Yeah. Now, in terms, the obviously muddy bit, of course, is within the mountain leader and the expedition skills module, which demands, staying overnight. We still see that as permissible on the basis that on the basis that it's a critically important part of a scheme. Tackles a key syllabus element, and in that gives effectively access to this educational product that we deliver, this educational service. So that's how we see it kind of working. We see it as being permissible. Yeah. So in terms of Wales, it's the land of the free right now in relation to England, which is, it's a lot simpler in Wales. Presently, up to 15 people can take part in an organised indoor activity and up to 30 outdoors. So it doesn't really restrict your course delivery as such. Accommodation and sport facilities are open or can reopen. So again, subject to appropriate mitigation, same again, and whilst maintaining the quality and the national consistency of what we deliver, it's permissible to deliver mountain training courses. Now, the slight weirdness that we had to kind of get over with that when that legislation first came out into force on the 9th of November was whether people could kind of cross over the border and go from England to Wales and vice versa. And that is permissible with a reasonable excuse, which in Wales includes the need to access educational services. So again, we saw that as permissible. We felt that candidates could travel from England and into Wales and vice versa to attend mountain training courses. Yeah, so that's a kind of roundup of where we're at with the present legislation. In terms of the Welsh stuff, we're not absolutely certain what's going to happen yet. In the future, it's very much subject to review. We'll see where we're at. So whilst course delivery is permissible in England and Wales, it is really, really important, on top of thinking about the mitigational aspects and also maintaining the quality and consistency, to also think about the public's perception of what we're actually doing. That's really important because obviously you lot as kind of ambassadors for mountain training out there delivering courses, you have a huge impact on the public's perception of what we do and how we kind of go about our business. And we're very much on show there as we kind of go out in bigger groups. Generally speaking, we've had very, very little kind of negative kind of feedback about our course delivery through this challenging time. I've had a few bits and pieces, but not very much. I think Simon would say the same for Cymru too. But this gives an example of a bit of feedback that I received just a few days ago, actually. So I just thought I'd kind of put it up there for you to have a little read through. I imagine most of you will have scanned through it while I've been chuntering on just then. But this is clearly quite an articulate person that dropped their thoughts down with genuine concerns. And therefore, we need to hear them. This person has compared what they've seen the general public do to what we are doing as mountain training. That's kind of evident in that first kind of paragraph just there. And clearly this person felt that they wished to engage with the mountain training individual and get a bit of an insight into why they felt it was permissible to kind of engage within that activity. And this person obviously then went on to explain that, it fitted within education and therefore it's permissible to kind of deliver courses. The wording this person's used here is exempt from current lockdown rules, which we're not exempt from current lockdown rules. Quite the opposite. We must mitigate, but it's permissible to deliver courses, as educational kind of, things, educational input just there. This person also clearly referred to being COVID secure, which is a government term, but obviously we need to sort of demonstrate that we're actually doing that out there on the hill. And then this person that brought up this kind of bit of feedback here also kind of queried the approach that mountain training person was making. Now, obviously, it's open to interpretation. You know, it's not as simple as just what that person says, or indeed what that mountain training person kind of demonstrated they were doing to mitigate. But obviously, this person was concerned and kind of thinking about it, and was very aware of the legislation and clearly quoted that back to the person concerned. So I guess it's just a little reminder just there that it's not just about being able to do something and mitigating appropriately and hopefully doing things by the book, but it's also important to think about the public's perception of what we're doing out there, why that's okay or indeed not. So which leads me to sort of effective mitigation. Now, I shared some documents with you all, I think a few days ago. One of those documents there was a piece of research that came to the fore a wee while ago that I imagine many of you now will have kind of read through. Yeah, I mean, this is probably the first piece of research that I've seen, which kind of looks at the infection risk in relation to, the kind of the work and the sport, the activity that we do, to try and kind of understand the kind of risk. And yes, it's centered around mountain sports, those being outdoors, but, I think quite a few things that have come up in this bit of research are probably very applicable to the work that we do delivering mountain training courses. So yeah, I've kind of fired that paper over to you, but maybe some of you had seen it before. And there's some really, really good stuff in here, put together by clearly some total wads in terms of like, that think about infection, specialists within, the kind of the virology here, the virus side of it all, but also have an understanding of the activity that we kind of do. And if you've got a name like Wackahage, you're clearly a total wad. So you must know what you're talking about. So it's subject to peer review. It's very much a kind of research piece of work. It's not based on kind of a primary research, collated kind of data, but it does highlight some good stuff. And one of the things I think it's really worth kind of, getting to grips with really is you consider your approach effectively mitigating is thinking about the virus weaknesses. So this thing is inactivated by detergents, household cleaning agents, alcohols, drying out, heat and sunlight. It's easily diluted from the point of danger by water. The bottom line is it's incredibly fragile and you don't need to do much to flipping kill it. It's incredibly fragile. It doesn't seem to be able to tolerate anything at all, like me really. So, that's really, really important to recognize. The airborne transmission risk is hugely reduced in windy conditions. So if you can get away from still air, you're obviously at a much lower risk. It can't transmit if we don't closely interact. So if we don't closely get together and we don't indeed sort of crowd together in an indoor environment, obviously the risk is relatively low. But there are times, of course, where it does thrive. It will thrive and it stays infectious for longer in cool, damp, poorly ventilated indoor environments. So if we find ourselves delivering courses in those types of environments, we're more at risk. So, we need to think about that within our mitigation. And also, I suppose, in terms of like kit storage and operating environments where other people are present and so forth, it's worth thinking also how long this thing can survive outside the human body, which seems to be, and although it's arguably, and there's lots of different kind of things out there, I guess, about 72 hours. It can survive for 72 hours, but obviously that might range a little bit according to the type of material and a whole set of other things. But the bottom line is it lasts for a certain amount of time and then it kind of dies. So in terms of mitigation, I would say that those things are pretty critical as you think very carefully about your approach. So from that paper, which I think is very, very good, and if you've not read it, you should definitely read it through. For me, the key kind of headlines are these. The risk of contracting or transmitting the SARS virus is incredibly low while participating in outdoor mountain sports. Incredibly low, very, very low. Yeah. This paper recognizes that there are high and low risk situations but also goes on to suggest that simple procedures can be used to reduce the risk, even when the risk, the virus prevalence is relatively high in the community as a whole. So that's why, in a way, it's permissible for us, it's permissible for us to sort of consider that course delivery is okay, even through a lockdown period when the risk of the community is relatively high. It's okay to go out and do mountain sports. It's okay to engage in these sorts of activities. Yeah. Now, of course, there's a very strong caveated sort of line to that our conventional course delivery is not necessarily low risk. There are definitely times, if we go for a kind of standard course about how we might standardly do it, where there are points of higher risk and points of lower risk. So we obviously want to keep it as low risk as possible. And that's why we've got to get a load of thought into it, how we kind of go about it. And the other thing to say is that within the legislation, and I've read a fair bit of it, unfortunately, over the last few months, it's absolutely key. And it's a legal requirement that, certainly for the UK, and it's very, very similar for Wales too, a gathering organizer must carry out a risk assessment and better show evidence of it. And also the organizer or manager must have taken all reasonable steps to limit the spread or limit the transmission of the virus. So although we see course delivery as permissible, like I said before, we must mitigate and we're obligated to do it. But we recognize that that mitigation can be targeted well to be most effective. So that's the thrust of it, really, I suppose. There we go. So what I want to do is I want to split you up into smaller groups to have a bit of discussion over how you have effectively mitigated or you feel you will intend to mitigate in the future as we kind of deal with this virus or ever-present risk of virus transmission. Okay, so the aim of this is for you to share thoughts and ideas, but most importantly, while maintaining the kind of integrity of the schemes and the quality of what we're actually delivering out there. So one of the brilliant things I would say about this whole kind of weirdness is that myself and Simon have not needed to give any sort of adaptations to course delivery through this period. People have carried on delivering the courses. We've not needed to do anything in particular heavyweight to them to allow them to be delivered. So yeah, how do we mitigate while maintaining this national consistency in the quality of course delivery? All right, there's going to be a bit of a mixture of group and activity here. I've got a few different tasks in a row. We'll try and mix up the groups a bit to get you talking to different people. Roughly speaking, we'll do about 10 minutes per session and then have a quick, 5 to 10 minutes per session. We'll kind of call an end to the group and you can kind of come back in, and then we'll do a mini debrief. Now, what I really, really like you to do is come back to me with 4 key points from that group and just drop them into the chat box, okay? Just so we can lead them just there. I'll go through a couple of them, but also, like I say, I'll also kind of pull them together and collate them and then get another document out to you, those attendees here, so you can have a little think over the stuff we've all collectively discussed. The chat stuff gets saved within Zoom, so it's easy for me to collate. And that would be the plan, if that's okay. So moving on to the first group discussion then. And the key question here really surrounds pre-course information, okay? So what should be communicated prior to your course in relation to COVID-19? Okay, what do you feel should be communicated prior to the course in terms of COVID-19? So I've dropped a few kind of, little questions down there, things to think about. And I've also circulated those documents from before. So, what would you include effectively within a declaration? How would you go about your risk assessments and how would you kind of present that to potentially send out before the course? How do you personally describe the likely interaction and the ever-present risk to your participants or your candidates? How do you get to grips with risk reduction being a shared responsibility? I think we all recognize we have a part to play in that. And would you consider any differing wording between training and assessment? Because one of my key concerns has certainly been whether if a person's performing particularly badly, whether they might sort of ride on the COVID thing to, you know, as part of an appeal or complaint. So is there anything in particular you would write differently between training and assessment? Okay, I'm not expecting you to answer all these questions in like 10 minutes. The key questions, the top one, what should be communicated prior to the course in relation to COVID-19? And to prompt the thoughts, again, I don't want you to go back to these documents now, but hopefully you've had a chance to sift through these. So I've got a declaration as an example, not necessarily endorsing it, from Danny Griffith. You've got the Plessy Brennan's risk assessment just there that I've circulated. This has survived being nailed on 4 occasions, I think, by the council, including the police. They went in to go and vet to see what they were doing, and they passed on each occasion. So that is praise indeed. And also some cowboy Mark Walker Mountaineering's kind of terms, added a few extra comments in there in relation to COVID to think about. Okay, so about 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes, something like that. We'll bring you back and we'll see how we go. Okay, great. Yeah, so I hope that prompted some good discussion. It seemed like nobody wanted to come back, so you'd either have gone for coffee or you were engaged there, which is great. So like I say, it'd be really great if you could just quickly drop down maybe, you know, 3 or 4 points per group, just drop down in the chat just there, that I'll collate at a later date. Somebody can just take that on, that would be much appreciated. And the question that was posed just there was, you know, what should be communicated prior to the course? And a few examples were given. So if you'd like to drop some thoughts down in there, that would be much appreciated. Okay, so Ruth's got back to us and said that she had plenty of personal conversations on a one-to-one basis prior to the course delivery. People have been including questions in that booking form. A room for 4. Set out the expectations, again from Ruth just there, setting out the expectation what people should have in terms of masks and such like, slides in advance with key learning points to reduce the need for close group work from Alan Pashley. Thank you. Managing small groups, so limited personal interaction, explaining the risks so candidates get and confirm any exposure to COVID. Good stuff coming down here. That was too fast and easy question, complex answers. Thank you, Cliff. Put my t-shirt on today. Building confidence with participants. All classroom delivery now outside, no classroom sessions. So these are quite practical sort of things, aren't they? We'll come back to that in a bit. But purely in terms of pre-course information, there's a couple of good points on there. So I'll bring those things together. I've got a few things to add myself at a later date. Medical details before attending, declarations before the start of the course. Sending out the information a little bit earlier so candidates get a chance to risk assess themselves and ready to COVID-19. Declaration sent out. That's great. So there's a few things on there. Set expectations, masks, general behavior, pre-course bits and pieces, self-declaration forms, transferring costs. That's a really good point from Graham, how you're kind of dealing with that sort of stuff. Booking with confidence, I guess. Okay, good. That's good. Now, do keep those things coming in if they sort of drop in. I'm happy to sort of mix and match them in there. But we will move on to make the most of this remaining half an hour. Well, we'll try to move on if I press the right button. Okay, so the next kind of group task will be split up again, hopefully into different groups this time, a mixture of people just there. Surrounds thinking about online briefing and debriefing. So this is something that quite a few of my providers have chosen to do as part of a way to kind of address the COVID stuff, and they've actually started to quite like it too. So maybe people might carry on and kind of do it in the future. So just to give a bit of context here, in terms of mountain training's definition of contact time, this includes situations where candidates and course staff can interact and directly communicate with each other face to face. Course staff should be present physically or online for it to be classed as contact time. So if you do an online briefing or debrief, it will be classed as contact time. That doesn't mean you don't go out on the hill and do the practical stuff. Flipping out, of course you got to do that. But if you choose to do an intro online, that would be classed as contact time. So the key question here really is, what syllabus content can you effectively deliver or cover during an online briefing? That's the key question, I would say. But also on top of that, to reflect there, what sort of tasks can be given between online introductions and practical delivery for training and assessment? What sort of stuff would you give in that gap between the kind of two, between the online briefing perhaps you might choose to do and the actual delivery? And also, how realistic do you think online debriefing is for training and assessment? How realistic do you think online debriefing is for training and assessment? So it's a little bit more complex, this slide. So if you wanted to take a quick picture of those questions, that would be good. And just for a little bit of, just to sort of food for thought, really, I suppose, I just thought to raise a few resources that are presently available to kind of support somebody doing something like this, which includes the introduction to mountain training kind of PowerPoints available in the course provider staff area, the strategic plans, mountain training videos, the D-Log instructional videos available for the FAQs, e-learning kind of modules, BMC resources, and the new kind of goal setting resources that are kind of arriving and being circulated. So the question there for the group is, what syllabus content can you effectively cover during an online briefing? I've also have a little think about introductions and the gap between the online briefing and potential online briefing and practical delivery, and also how realistic do you think it would be for the debriefs? Okay, so if you want to split up, we'll pull you back in 10 minutes, or 5-10 minutes or so, and then we'll hopefully get some thoughts down again. That'd be great. Thanks, Kath.
We're not hearing enough of your voice, Mark. We need to give you more art.
Yeah, well, thank you, Simon. Right, great. So it seems like most people are back. Yeah, just a little thing there that I do really appreciate. We're kind of getting through these pretty quick, and I know they're fast-paced discussions in those chat rooms. Just kind of making best use of the time. The other thing that's very obvious from the sort of discussion is, some people I know haven't delivered any courses yet. Whether that's, the organizations put restrictions on working or just chosen to not run courses, absolutely fine. The key thing is that we're thinking about these different things and how we might approach it, share some thoughts and ideas, get some national consistency. So hopefully the stuff that will come from this should prompt a bit of that when you need to hit the ground running and start running stuff. Hopefully you better kind of get the support that you need. So yeah, sort of debriefing this a little bit. The question was really, what syllabus content can you effectively cover during online briefings and debriefs? So do drop the things just down there. Ross has come back with covering an intro, a home paper, and ethos online, but wherever possible, adjust your classroom to make it more suitable, as some folk are zoomed out, me included. I totally agree there. Absolutely. I mean, they're practical courses, aren't they? And they demand practical delivery, practical competencies. If we're doing it all in a virtual kind of online world, it might not necessarily be accessible for some. It certainly won't necessarily hit the mark. So thanks for that, Ross. Yeah, and saying, if possible, just try and deliver it under a shelter. Yeah, fair enough. If you've got a place to actually do that, absolutely, that might work well for you. I must admit, having moderated a few courses, though, I've seen quite a lot of people try to introduce schemes in car parks in the pee and rain. And that is quite challenging in terms of the course delivery we're looking for. The other thing I'd throw into the mix there is that we had a Mount Leader training course run a little while ago in a whole week of challenging weather. And to be honest with you, it was very, very challenging to deliver the syllabus elements and keep the candidates kind of on board, because they were just literally surviving as they made their way through it. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but challenging. Offering training offering post-training kind of action planning sessions online, very effective from Alan Pashley there. Intro to each other, debriefs, online assessments, lots of good stuff coming in here. No problems briefing one-to-one online, gives time for reflection on both sides. Reeves coming back with introductions and briefing, COVID info, route planning for beginnings, end of, debriefs, action plans, D-log, MTA and resources, the full shabazz there. Few points from Baggy just there. Lecture type sessions online, need to make sure to get the customers together at the same time can be tricky, agreed. Also, in terms of like timing, how long before the practical course delivery do you knock this thing off? I mean, do you do it the night before, or do you do it a few days before, allowing kind of tasks between, you know, in that period? So there's some good stuff there going on. Buggy's thinking about the sort of coordinating and the cost of it in there, I think. Something come back from Jane, pre-course paperwork, welcomes, expectations, homepage, supportive action plan, and feedback online. Different style of, it's a different style of learning online. People find that reading and listening at the same time difficult, me included, Anthea, certainly. So there's a challenge there. So maybe it's worth just kind of using videos or displaying the information in a different way, using tasks, if you're savvy that way. Okay, some good stuff. So if anything else comes in on that, do jot it down. But we'll move on to perhaps a final task, actually, given the time constraints upon us. So I'm just going to ask a very basic question now. Just purely thinking about venues, because of course that relates to the syllabus content that we're delivering too. So it kind of pulls together a couple of things just there. And I just want you to purely think about the venues that you might intend to deliver courses in, or you have delivered courses in through this challenging time. I just want you to think about the high risk situations you've experienced using course delivery or might experience, and how did you reduce the risk in those situations that were raised just there. Okay, so purely thinking about the high risk situations you've experienced during course delivery and how you have reduced or might choose to reduce the risk in those environments, those situations that you've raised. Okay, so a final little group work task just there. Thank you, Gav. Okay, great. Yeah, so hopefully had some good, worthy kind of discussions just there, thinking about the high risk situations you've experienced during course delivery in terms of transmission of the virus and how you dealt with those risks, those situations. If you want to drop a few thoughts down there, that'd be much appreciated. Like I say, I'll pull all this together. So Baggy's come back with customers do forget or do not really appreciate social distancing, the importance of. The biggest risk, therefore, is the instructor. Thanks, Baggy. Sorting off kit there. Exclusive venue use of indoor and outdoor environments, interactions there. Mask for all within 2 meters, including outside. Thanks from Sam. Graham come back with in the lakes, it's quite busy with other hill users, so choosing quieter venues has been quite a challenge. Good point, yeah, especially when you want to go to those classic environments, I imagine, to deliver certain aspects of the schemes. Pinch points like toilets seem a bigger risk, yeah, maybe when we're not actively supervising, I guess, or supporting there. Consideration given to parking options, good point, Alan, thanks a lot. Yeah, Helen's come back with giving customers buffs. I imagine items to help mitigate, I guess, to reducing the risk just there. There are buffs and then there are buffs, I hear. Navigation instruction courses need extra care, sort of stepping in and out to give, you know, a bit of feedback. I imagine looking at a map. Toilets, big issue. Some public ones causing logistical issues. From Alan, from Sam just there, agreeing with the toilet issue. One of those comments are coming in. I moderated a course quite recently in an indoor climbing wall. It was really, really well done, but the room that we used was actually quite a closed space, and it was kind of poor ventilation in there. So we definitely had to think about other ways to mitigate. Coming back with parking comments just there, with all candidates using their own transport. Okay. Christie's come back with tackling a social distancing issue. People's perception of distance in a light-hearted, straight-talking kind of way, making it a safe environment for others, but also making an environment where you can challenge other people and feel confident to do it so in a kind way. I guess that's particularly sort of potentially difficult on assessment. Reminding clients that they need to take responsibility for their own social distancing, not just wait for us. Kate's come back with higher situations where anything that effectively is not on the hill, it seems, which includes travel, indoor space, cafes, and etc. Lots of focus on cleaning hands, giving, supporting each other, respecting distance, changing the way we communicate, and feeding back to candidates to prioritize these issues. It's been great discovering new ways that, to new areas that are quieter. Good opportunity there, Callum, thanks. All our experiences of those leaders that are developing and useful discussion points. Good stuff on there. Obviously a lot of discussion just gone on, which is really great. Okay, I'll let those keep on coming in, but I am mindful of the time, being 10:30, running over a fraction there. Like I say, I will pull all those things together for you and recirculate a document with additional feedback from that I've kind of received through moderations and other discussions, and also on course report forms. So just to bring a little summary to this here, I guess. The key thing for us is that mountain trading course delivery remains permissible in England and Wales. That's subject to further kind of legislation that might potentially be coming our way. And we'll do our very, very best to get, you know, to react to that efficiently. So hopefully giving you the support you need, and hopefully a little bit of a steer that you might need in terms of future courses. Providers and course staff are obligated to reduce infection risk. That's absolutely key, fundamental. You know, it says that right through the legislation for England and Wales, and we must do it, which includes potentially a risk assessment as well as kind of practical ways to limit the spread of the virus. The risk varies, I would say, within the courses that we deliver, but it's definitely considered lower in outdoor environments, which is great. So there's no reason to just, you know, carry on doing our stuff if we're appropriately mitigating outdoors. Effective mitigation varies, very much dependent on the activity and the environment, and we need to be quite flexible in our approach here and react accordingly. And I would also say that you know, the strategies you use to kind of manage this risk and reduce this infection need and demand constant review. We've got to be flexible. We've got to roll with the punches a little bit so we can get these courses running and off the ground. So that would be my summary, I guess. Simon, you just come back with a point there. Do you want to interject?
No, I was really just reminding the MTE providers that in law, the Welsh Government have got to review the current legislation, and that'll begin tomorrow. The situation in Wales is such that we all know courses can be delivered anyway. I don't expect any major changes to the legislation from tomorrow, but nevertheless, at the minute, because we've enough scope to run courses, we can continue. We'll see what that review of the legislation brings. I'm on a Welsh Sports Association Zoom call at 2 o'clock this afternoon, where I'll get an update from the Welsh Government, and if anything comes to that, I'll fire that out to everybody. But do keep in touch, keep emailing.
One of the things just to chuck something in there, one of the things I think has been quite interesting is that obviously the legislation and the guidance has been written very, very quickly, reacting to, the changing risk. And as time's run on, the wording that they've used within the legislation has been refined. Certainly in the case of the English legislation, kind of making an, effectively saying accommodating and offering accommodation is not okay, with the very limited exception for children accessing education. That's quite a tight refinement. So sure, we don't expect big changes to come necessarily, but we are expecting kind of wording changes, and we're hoping that will mean that our activity will still be okay to carry on being delivered. We think it will be. But yeah, we'll keep you up to date on that and do our best. Good. Right. I think we are done here. You got a feedback thing come in, but thank you for your comments coming in. That they're much appreciated. It's tricky. We're all finding our feet here, I guess. The next session for many of you, I imagine, is Martin Chester, the hero that is, at 11 a.m. So you've just got enough time to get a cup of tea and go to the loo, and then I guess many of you will be back on again. So thank you very much. Kath, do you want to work your magic?